Hello, Studio Brule viewers, and welcome, and I'm glad you could join us to this first attempt at a premiere of Janice's Fiamengo File episode 108 on the Women Are Wonderful effect. So Janice, maybe you could, before I say so, I should point out that I have my patriarchal hat on, and I have my patriarchal scotch, and no patriarch will get it very far without their patriarchal cigar on hand.
What I want to know is, when are you going to smoke the patriarchal cigar?
Well, I'm not sure. It's a prop, what can I say? But I do enjoy a cigar once in a while. On camera, in the apartment here, I'm not so sure. On camera, not so bad, but I don't know about having to live with it in the apartment afterwards.
Right. All right.
So Janice, what put you in the mind to take on this extremely serious topic?
Yeah, it's a real downer, isn't it? Not much to laugh about there. This has been something that you and I have talked about for so long, right? And I think we actually were having a phone conversation not too long ago, a few weeks ago, a month ago, and you were saying that you see one of the big issues of our society is that men have lost the capacity to say no to women, which is another really interesting subject. I worked that in very briefly to this video, but it's so striking, that fact that men can't say no to women. And we also talked about this business that it just seems that we have got past the point where it's not just a matter of gynocentrism or feminism always pushing the narrative that men are bad, but that we have as a culture overall accepted that women are incapable of true evil. And it's crazy, because if we really believe in equality, if we believe that women are fully as human as men, then we have to believe that women are capable of cruelty and violence and aggression too. And I mean, that study by Sonia Starr out of the University of Michigan Law School, where she found a 63%, if I'm remembering correctly, gender gap in prison sentencing, that's astounding. That says it all. It
does. I do have something to say about this, but people are telling me I've got a problem with my mic and it's buzzing. So I'm just going to try and fix that here right now by switching mics.
It sounds pretty good to me right now. Are people still hearing?
I got a message from somebody in the chat said it's, let me just see what they're saying now.
It was buzzing before. It says it's
gone now. It says it's gone. So I don't know. But the folks who are listening, do tell me if it does pick up again, and I'll try and switch out microphones or audio gear here. So,
I mean, the thing that we started with in the video, which I don't really discuss for any length of time, is the campaign ad by Dana Nessel to become Attorney General for Michigan. And I mean, maybe there isn't anything to be said about that. Like, that is just flabbergasting. And this is an old story now. That campaign ad came out in 2018, I believe.
17, I think. But
17, yeah. Right. She was elected in late 2018 and began her term as Attorney General for Michigan, I think on January 1st, 2019. So she was successful with that. I mean, what do you say about that? I look back to see if there was a lot of blowback. Certainly, if you look at the comments beneath the campaign ad video, a lot of people said, hey, I thought this was satire. Are you kidding me? This is a real campaign ad. So a lot of people, mostly men, I think, were shocked and couldn't believe that somebody could put that out with a straight face. But I did a search on it. There wasn't much commentary.
There wasn't that much of a backdrop. And as we well know, that if a man came up and said one of his qualifications was that he has a penis, I mean, his career in every field, never mind politics, he won't get a job as a hamburger flipper after that.
No. Yeah, and any woman who said that about any other identifiable group, and rightly so. would be drummed out of politics or out of any respectable career. But somehow it's perfectly okay to say that about men. And, like there were even like the Huffington Post did a piece on that campaign ad and thought it was bold and, provocative.
HuffPost,
I know.
I mean,
Well, but
they're
a
pretty
number
feminine.
of
But I agree with you.
of outlets thought, it was fine. It was kind of risky, kind of edgy. I found one article where the guy was arguing that it was a kind of joke. It was a bit tongue in cheek, but at the same time, it was making a serious point about male sexual misbehavior.
And I'll say this. It was a bit of a joke, but the same thing applies. Like that it's only she or a woman can get away with that joke. Nobody else can make a joke at all about anybody. Like a man can't make that kind of joke, and get away with it. But to be honest, I do think it's a bit of a joke. But at the other side of it, I think she should be treated with the same standards that her opponents are subjected to. So in that sense, joke or not, she should have disqualified her from winning.
Yeah. I don't think okay, it's a joke in the sense that that's her escape clause. She can say it's a joke the minute she's called on it, and she's suspected that she might be called on it by somebody. But it's the kind of nudge nudge, wink wink. It isn't really a joke because you all know that what I'm talking about is real. She did go on to say that she pledged not to sexually harass or sexually assault anyone, and the clear implication was that as a woman she's far less likely to. Although
she was referring to somebody, a previous person who had been accused of it. Now I don't know the details of that case. That could be just all baloney as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it wasn't just out of the blue without some sort of background reference. There was somebody out there in that position who had apparently, or she claimed, or
there was an allegation that somebody had done that. Certainly.
At the same time, I don't give any weight to these allegations anymore. They're just too many of them turn out to be ploys for advantage in a competitive workplace. But I wanted to draw you back, Janice, to this idea that, and we've talked about this several times, that in our culture we're unwilling to see a dark side of female nature. We're unwilling to look at it. Yeah. Where psychologically do you think that's coming from?
Yeah, well, that's a big question. Where psychologically does that come from? We all come from our mother's womb. Our earliest experience is of longing for the all-enveloping love and nurturing of our mothers. It makes sense that we would all have a great deal of difficulty of associating that figure of love and maternal care with evil. So, I think it has those kinds of deep roots. But it's reinforced, obviously, by everything in our culture now, and by a feminism that constantly reiterates the men bad, woman good narrative.
And you had mentioned in your video that, oh crap, now I forgot my point. I'll go on to another point. If psychologically, I would think that for men to see women as having a dark side, then they, by extension, would have to face the fact that their own mother has a dark side. So there's a reluctance to see your mother that way, and that, I think, spills over into a reluctance to see any woman that way. Another thing that we talked about this before, that there were other cultures in which the adult males of their village, at the time of coming into puberty or into early adulthood, they would go through a ritual of physically separating the man-child, or the new adult male, from the mother, and there would be wailing, crying, and the mother would try to hold the child, and the adult male group would come around the child and envelop him and take him off into some ritual for a couple of weeks. And this is to indicate that the the future, or for that young male to fulfill his destiny, he has to be physically separated from his mother. He has to put her behind him. And we don't do that nowadays. We have almost a mother worship that goes for life. And I think the truth is that men have to be able to say no to women in order to be an adult male. And that ritual at some point, I think, used to facilitate that separation.
Yeah, and that is the other aspect to what we've talked about. By the way, the buzzing has come back with your
I just read that.
microphone.
You know, I'm going to try and switch mics. Well, you can carry on there while I do this
Okay.
technical thing here.
I'll keep on talking.
I'm listening.
Well, we've talked about this before, that, and that was what struck me so forcefully, was that, I think you can make the argument that all societies, all successful societies, have been to some extent or another gynocentric, have valued and placed a high priority on the protection of women. Women have been very important. But all previous societies that I know of were very interested in the distinction between goodness in a woman, a virtuous woman, and a bad woman. And it seems like now we don't accept that there is such a thing. Anything a woman does is considered to be either good in itself, or if we admit that it's wrong, we admit that it's wrong only in terms of seeing that person, that perpetrator of whatever crime, as a woman who was turned bad by abuse. And so that's what's so striking about articles like the ones that I quoted in the video, where you see all these politicians and other pundits talking about moves to keep women out of prison altogether, always talking about how these are women who were led into their life of crime by men, or else they were abused by men, and that's what led them to become violent. Well, most men in prison also were led to become violent in some way or to become criminal. Many of them were abused as children. Many of them came from lives of deprivation. Many of them have mental health issues. Many of them have addiction issues. Now, I'm not sure how I feel about moves to keep people out of prison in general. I mean, I like the idea in the abstract, although I believe that there are some bad people that need to be kept out of society. But certainly, if we're going to talk about reducing the number of women in prison, women only account for less than 5% of the entire prison population, certainly in North America and in Britain, I believe. Why aren't we talking about that in relation to men too? It simply isn't on the table when it comes to men.
Well, and I agree. Certainly for non-violent crimes, non-violent crimes, I don't see whether prison is going to help them in any manner or help us in any manner. There may be some other way to punish non-violent crimes. But they are also not willing to look at the effect of the mother raising those boys,
Exactly.
and the effect of the absence of fathers. None of these well recognized. Actually, now you can't say that these effects are even extreme or fringe. These are well recognized effects: the absence of the father, child abuse by either father or mother. And mothers are the predominant perpetrators of child abuse.
Yeah, women are as likely as men, or more likely than men, depending on what particular type of violence one is interested in studying, to commit violence in the home. That's where women enact their violence. So if you're looking at sibling violence, for instance, women are just as likely as men. If you're looking at elder abuse, women are just as likely as men to abuse elders. And if you're looking at abuse of children, women are more likely, partly because women have more contact with very young children. But, there it is. There is women are not less inclined to be violent. And this is the elephant in the room. When you look at male criminality, how many of those men were raised without fathers, and how many were abused by their mothers?
Yeah.
the thing we can't talk about in our society at all. And this isn't, this is not about, I've just been on Twitter today and have been so many people saying, what a misogynist I am and how I'm trying to encourage men to hate women and making lots of money off this supposedly lucrative project.
What are you hiding from me?
Yeah. And, and like it's the furthest thing from my mind. I don't expect that I have the power to make any man hate women, for one thing, but it's not what I'm interested in at all. It's just that I can't help but be so struck by the blindness of the narrative that gets told over and over again in the mainstream media. Men are always bad. Men are always the perpetrators. Women are always the innocent victims. If we really believe that women are fully human, we've got to face up to the fact that women are capable of evil too. Nobody's pretending that men aren't. As a society, we deal with that fact. We've recognized that men have that side to them. We've developed lots of mechanisms to deal with that. And we absolutely won't even look at it in women. And it has very negative effects on male victims. Obviously, it also has very negative effects on women themselves.
Well, it does. I think this is really predominantly or possibly only in Western culture, right?
This what we're
seeing.
I don't know other. I couldn't say. It's hard to say.
I couldn't say either. But when you look at just like what goes on in Islamic culture, which is 1 billion people in the world, you can't say that they don't see a dark side to female nature.
Seems like it, yeah.
And
although I've heard different things, from some people who have lived in various Islamic countries who say actually you have all sorts of privileges as a woman.
Yes. I'm not saying that they're not privileges, but that I think they also do talk about and recognize a dark side to female nature.
Yeah, there's a clear distinction between those women who deserve those privileges and protections and those women who don't. And that's the thing that has been completely eroded in our culture.
Well, there's a code of behavior that women have to adhere to and men have to adhere to. But if you think about our culture, there's almost no restrictions. It's like there's no code of behavior for females.
Right. Yeah.
Like anything she wants to do, when she wants to do it, it's her right because otherwise you're oppressing her.
Yeah. But I mean, if we look at false allegations, for example, even when a woman is found, incontrovertibly, when she confesses or when the evidence is overwhelming because she's been caught on film, doing something that she then claimed was what the man had done to her, smashing her car window or whatever, and when it's known that this is a woman who is trying to send a man to jail on a false allegation, still there's this sense that she was really victimized. Many people will believe this. She probably was really victimized and she did these other false things because she didn't think she would be believed. So she's still somehow a victim.
Yeah, of course. I'm wondering how much of this is a natural result of a previously gynocentric culture that goes back all the way to the days of chivalry and before. But prior to feminism, when this age of chivalry began, the world itself was actually quite a dangerous place. Like people settled their grievances and their differences by a duel or a fight to the death. Hand-to-hand combat was common in political circles, as I talked about in the Birth of Feminism video. So once all of the world was made safe, the whole purpose of a gynocentric the whole rationale for a gynocentric culture collapsed, but gynocentrism didn't go away. And it morphed, I think, into this now women are wonderful effect, that women by nature can do no wrong and cannot have any dark side.
Yeah.
I'm not trying, I'm thinking that maybe that plays a role into it, not that that's the whole story, because I think there's a lot more deep psychology involved in that, with what we just spoke about a minute before, where the problem of separating from your mother. And when I mean that, when I say that, I mean seeing your mother then as an adult sees another person. A person complex with faults and dreams and unfulfilled urges and desires and all the rest of the stuff that every human being has to deal with. We don't see women that way.
No, it seems not. I mean, I do, and obviously some individuals do.
Yeah. You're by far in the minority, and we are considered. You and I are considered extremists by 99+% of our own culture.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah, and I don't know why, because nothing particularly unusual, like, my experiences, and I think from what I know of you, your experiences, we weren't outliers really in any way. I mean, I had many positive relationships with men, many positive mentors, teachers. I loved my dad. But there are lots of feminists loved their dads too, I assume. Many feminists are married, have sons they profess to love. And yet somehow when it comes to looking at the world, they've got these incredible prejudices. Yeah, and we're seen as the ones who are stoking hatred.
Well, I'll just add into what you're saying there about these feminists that love their dads and so on. If we look at Christianity, for instance, Christianity as an ideology or religion is extremely complicated with mythologies that can be analyzed for your entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not a simple religion, but and people who call themselves Christians know absolutely nothing about it. Zero. They just
I know lots of Christians who know lots about their religion.
Yeah, you do, but you're in a very rare circle of intellectuals, Janice.
No. Well, it depends on. Yeah, certainly some Christians don't know much about their own religion.
A lot don't.
Lots of evangelicals spend a lot of time learning about the Bible, though.
Learning about the Bible as a literal word of God and nothing more, usually, or often. I'm not going to say usually even. But my point is that people call themselves Christians and they don't know anything about Christianity. They call themselves Christians because it is the dominant ideology in your culture at this moment, right? It's easy, it's safe, it's rewarded to say you're a Christian. And then you just have to say, well, Jesus Christ is the Son of God, you celebrate Christmas, you go to church, everything's good, you're a good person in society. Now, feminism has come to that point, I think. A lot of people call themselves a feminist because, feminist stands for equality between men and women. I can get behind that. I can get behind that. But they don't know anything at all about feminism.
Yeah, I'd go with you on that. Yeah, I would say that I think for Christians to say that they're Christians is actually now quite difficult. Maybe 50 years ago, it was a kind of accepted thing. It's actually now, certainly in elite circles, an invitation to be mocked and derided as
that is true.
Yeah, either as an idiot, an unthinking, ignoramus, or as a hater of some sort. But yes, I would say that for feminism, I think has in many ways replaced Christianity as the dominant ideology, the accepted ideology. And many people, it's true, haven't looked into what feminists actually say and what they really believe.
Yeah. But in the same way, most or a lot of Christians haven't looked into what Christianity really says or believes either. Yeah, and I'm not saying this to imply an equivalence between like that Christianity is equally bad to feminism. No. Christianity, I don't see it as a bad ideology. I don't see it. I see it as a cultural explanation, a guiding force, cosmology for humanity that survived thousands of years and was necessary and has yielded some very positive fruit.
That's for sure.
But I do believe that a lot of Christians that just don't know anything about it and just adopt it because that's what you do when you're in a Christian culture. And
any dominant idea. I mean, many of us just don't have time to do the work, to investigate everything that matters and that is accepted as belief in our culture. Of all sorts of scientific principles that I don't really understand, that I accept as true because people have told me that they are true, and I don't, I haven't had time to read about them, and I don't have the intellectual wherewithal. But yeah, I think in general. We haven't investigated all sorts of ideas, but the thing is that, like, the impulse to excuse women and to vilify men it's so strong in so many people. The outrage, even if you just try to point out something good about men. I was pointing out on Twitter today the thing that launched this avalanche of accusation that I'm a terrible misogynist, was I was pointing out that it was men who attempted to and were successful in stopping the knife attacker in London yesterday, and that they weren't identified as men. I was reading a report that called them passers-by and members of the public and brave individuals, but did not call them men. That's a general trend in newspaper reporting. If men do something bad, you can bet their sex is identified. Yeah. They're males then. But if something bad happens to them, they're just called people. You know, if they're victims of something, they're just called people. And if they do something good, they're just people too, gender neutral. It's one of the ways that empathy for men is leached out of our culture. Whereas when something bad happens to women, or women do something good or something notable, they're always identified. It's always identified as a gender issue. If women are suffering in some way, that's how empathy is affirmed and provoked for women. So I was just pointing that out on Twitter. And people went crazy suggesting that, this was politicizing the issue and gender had nothing to do with it. The gender of those who intervened had nothing to do with anything, and I shouldn't point it out. Well, the man who was doing the attacking was male too, so therefore somehow nothing good should ever be said about men who act heroically and selflessly. The logic is just so crazy, but people get really angry when you say anything positive about men or anything negative about women. So
no, for certain. And I want to clarify here that I don't think that, again, maybe I didn't get this through, I got through before, but Christianity, I don't see it as a bad force in the world net, okay? But I do see feminism as irrevocably bad, unrescuable, cannot be modified. There's no, as I mentioned in the Birth of Feminism video, there is no redeeming feminism. It was born from hate. Its purpose is to hate and cause division and destruction.
No, I agree with that.
Feminism, not women. Feminism, not women. No,
definitely not women. I mean, well, obviously not.
I feel I have to say that all the time.
I know. I love women and men and want the best for all. I really do. But yeah, I agree with you, Steve. The more I investigate feminism, the more I see it as utterly irredeemable. And I want everybody to know that from the beginnings, it was based on resentment. That's what it has always been, a movement based on baseless resentment, probably envy as well. And
repressed
envy, shame, as you pointed out in your video.
It's not my idea. This idea has been around since the first people wrote the Bible. I think that whole idea was implicit in the example that we use with Cain and Abel that Peterson brought to light, and many others. Many others have commented on how repressed shame and resentment can turn into hatred and all this evil stuff, right?
Right, exactly. And it's there, and it needs to be recognized, because the idea that somehow appeasing feminist demands is going to finally bring an end to this war is completely wrong. Anything, feminist demands have increased over the last 10 years as women have achieved most of the stated goals of the women's movement. This is not about goals. It's not about equality.
Well, look at, of course it has, look at how even pettier and pettier their bitching is. Mansplaining, manspreading.
How men sit on the subway, unbelievable. Sit
down to pee. I mean, it's gotten down to it's not even micro, it's nano-managing men.
A man who looks in the wrong way at a woman, the male gaze supposedly so devastating and so hurtful.
All topics you've discussed on the Fiamengo Files.
More and more rules designed, it seems, explicitly to make men feel uncomfortable in their skins and to know that whatever they do, they're being watched and judged and maybe, hauled away for criminal questioning by the police, which has happened, as we've also discussed, to many men who are doing nothing but minding their own business, walking in a tube station, as happened to
Mark
Mark
Pearson.
Pearson, for example, or many, many other men who found themselves on the nasty, bitter end of a false allegation. So
And that's bully behavior. Like appeasing bullies never works.
mhm.
You know, bullies have to be stood up to, and then they cower. You know,
Yeah.
but I mean, there's some differences, obviously. But I want to talk about, or do you think we should talk about the next phase of the birth of feminism? We had a few conversations. I'm not sure how much we should let out of the bag on this at this point.
I don't know. No, I think we better save that one. That's a big topic for another discussion probably.
Well,
But
we can say that there will be two parts, two
Mhm.
more parts, right?
Two more parts, yeah. Yeah. We want to look especially at the very late 19th century, early 20th century, leading up to about 1970.
Right.
Various gains that were made by women that have been ascribed to the women's movement, feminist movement, that are not actually necessarily the responsibility of the feminist movement. And then we want to especially look at the way that feminism took over the academy and all of the implications of that, and how from that point on, starting in about 1970, feminism became the academic orthodoxy and then spread into law and into social policy, into journalism, into education, and that's really what enabled it to gain this absolute stranglehold over culture.
Well, I think you just let a good bit out of the bag there.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, lots of
That's okay.
a lot of
There's lots of research
to read. Yeah, and to discover.
But since you mentioned it, let's give a little teaser there that the pivot point of 1970 is critical for feminism. And it's critical because that is when women's studies was entered into university systems.
Yeah.
And that gave their ideology the legitimacy of the academic world.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Giving them the ability
it utterly changed the nature of all research, because of course it didn't stay in women's studies. It went out it's invaded every single discipline that there is. It's now in physics and engineering and biochemistry and everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's utterly changed the nature of academic research and everything about how students are taught, how research grants are given out, how faculty are hired. The corruption is so absolute.
Their illegitimate research, which is not research at all, it's propaganda.
Yes.
But it has the legitimacy of a university academic stamp on it.
Yeah.
And those research reports were then used to create law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And law, feminist law.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's quite a story. It's
a big story.
Feminism
is the biggest scam, lie takeover in human history. They took over. Well, they've taken over the Western world, which is the most complex, highly developed, successful civilization in human history by any measure.
Yeah.
And feminists took it over in less than 2 generations.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's an incredible feat.
Yeah. Yeah.
It warrants study, great study.
Yeah. So stay tuned. It's enough to occupy us for many years to come.
Quite a while. And we're going to be hopefully, we're going to be doing fundraising. I keep pounding on this, and the reason is because YouTube hates us and keeps taking our advertising dollars away.
And you were going to warn people that it's best not, if they want to donate, when we don't want to pressure people, we don't like to beg for money, but if people want to donate, it's best not to do it right through the super chat, but on your website, I think.
Through PayPal is it depends. There's nothing wrong with a $1 or $2 donation coming through, or maybe even $5, but super chats takes a huge percentage.
Yeah.
Whereas PayPal, when you get like $5 or above, then the percentage that PayPal takes gets down to a reasonable value. Whereas the YouTube, if for example, somebody gives $100 through the YouTube Super Chat, I don't think we get more than $50, $60
It's
of
really
that.
bad.
Or it might be 70. They say they take 30%, but I mean, I don't see that money coming into the account.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
showing up from what I can see.
But thank you so much to everybody for your
Thank you very
support,
much.
for
Yes.
tuning in and everything else. So I think we should bring this to a close. I have to make dinner now.
Right. Janice is in the West Coast, so
Yeah.
it
Got
is 5 o'clock for you there?
It's 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock.
Yeah.
So just to cap this off, this 3-part series will be distilled, we hope to. This is our stretch goal and why we're going to be looking for a fair bit of fundraising. We're hoping to get this into theaters as a full feature documentary of the history of feminism.
Yeah.
And rigorously researched and presented.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Janice, once again, thank you for that brilliant Fiamengo file, as usual.
Not brilliant, but just touching on an obvious thing that I don't know, I don't understand why more people don't see this very obvious fact.
I don't know.
But
Some
anyway,
people
yeah.
feel the earth is flat too. So, and I don't mean to insult anybody out there who believes the earth is flat, but it's round.
Okay.
Sorry. I'll leave it at that. I'd like to be a little bit lighthearted at times. If you can't laugh in the face of your death, well, then maybe you've lost a little. So
Okay.
Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned. We'll be having more and more live streams, and I think that the premiere went well. I will probably try that again.
Yeah, that's fine.
And we'll see you folks soon. And
Okay.
thanks, Janice.
All righty. See ya.